Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time today. I'm going to talk a lot about how to actually make money out of all of this stuff we're talking about. AI is wonderful, and we see a lot of great stuff in movies, and we read a lot of stuff in the news. But at the bottom of the end of the day, we're all here for, or at least most of us are here for one main reason, and that's to figure out, for each of our businesses, how do we turn all of these new technologies into actual bottom line results? And when you look at the potential and the opportunity size, it's huge. So, few stats that came out from a report that McKinsey did last fall, just to ground everybody in how big the opportunity is. Now, first, half of what we do today, and actually half of what we pay people to do today, can actually already be automated with existing technology. Not things that are hypothetical, not things that might be here in the future, but things that are here and real today. If you look at the size of what that means from a growth point of view, McKinsey's calling out $13 trillion being added to the global GDP over the next decade. That is, frankly, an obscene amount. And to put that in perspective from a growth rate point of view, that's actually twice as fast as the growth that we saw from the internet. Think about that. Everything that changed over the past decade as the world moved from a non-digital to a digital first and a mobile first world, going at twice that rate. That's what's been forecasted, and based on early indicators, that's what we're actually seeing. So, before I jump into the meat of this presentation about how to actually make money and where we see real opportunities, I want to give everyone 20 seconds on who we are. Agorai is a company that is relatively new. Some of you are working with us, and thank you very much. For those that don't know us, very simply, we are a group that is focused on accelerating the ecosystem of applied AI. We're constantly looking at all of the AI assets and data assets that are out there that are being built by new entrepreneurs and put together by small and large corporations, working with companies to connect them to those specific tools and apps for their businesses, and then helping them deliver very quickly. We aren't interested in building out large programs for what might happen over the future years. We're interested in helping you figure out what can be done today, connecting you with the companies and data assets that enable that, and then making that real and driving a real impact on your business. So with that frame of mind, we see a lot of things happening in the AI economy, and I'm going to walk you through a few of those. But first I want to play one video clip, and it's, I promise, the only video clip I have. And for those that have seen me present before, many of you know I like to include clips that drive a point home. So for the next 30 seconds, bear with me through this one.
We're adding a little something to this month's sales contest. As you all know, first prize is Cadillac. We think this is second prize. Second prize is $17,000. Third prize is you fired.
Third prize is you're fired. And that is all too real in the world that we live in today from a business point of view. To drive that point home, every 2 weeks on average, a company is being dropped out of the S&P 500. The first time I heard this stat was actually years ago, and it blew me away. I was like, that can't possibly be true. Companies that we think of as the absolute leaders in their industries, one of them falling off every 2 weeks, that didn't make any sense to me. And that was 5 years ago, which is the first time I started talking about this. It is the only slide that I still use in presentations from 5 years ago because it is still true. Last year, not quite every 2 weeks, but pretty close, 23 companies got knocked out of the S&P 500. And this is being driven by transformation and change that AI and data are enabling. So, let's put that in the frame of AI. Going back to some of the work that's been done in the analysis, there is a huge gap between first place, second place, and third place. So this is one of the more interesting tidbits that I dug out of that report, and I think it's really, really incredibly important to look at the impact of being a first mover, versus following or, dare I say, not even choosing to adopt. And that's a 122% jump for companies that are actually willing to engage and adopt an AI quickly, followed by a 10% increase for those that are followers, basically steak knives, and for the laggards, you're fired. This is something that we all need to keep in the back of our heads. So the obvious question that it begs is, what does it take to become a front runner? I think the most important thing for people to understand is changing a company is a part of who you are, and it's part of your company culture. And having a culture that is comfortable with change is, to me, a prerequisite for becoming an AI-enabled company and an AI-first organization. So everything I'm going to say after this is within the frame of reference that culture drives everything you do as an organization, and having a culture that is comfortable with change, that is willing to learn and do things in different ways because it creates better outcomes or has the potential to create better outcomes, is fundamental to everything that I'm going to talk about after this. Now, with that culture front and center in your minds, the first thing is you have to think about data as a strategic asset of your company. This is not a byproduct. It's not something that you have that you need to figure out how to work with. It is potentially the most valuable thing you have. If not the most valuable thing, absolutely one of the most valuable assets you have. And most companies don't think about it that way. They think about it as, oh yeah, I've got data, it's a mess, I need to figure out what to do with it. But this is actually what drives results. And as you look at artificial intelligence, data is your fuel. So you can have the best car on the planet, it's beautiful, you've got a Ferrari, but if you don't have the fuel to put in it, and data is that fuel, you will not be successful. And you will have a very expensive hunk of metal that doesn't go anywhere. So understanding data is the first thing that I think companies have to do. And that's playing out already. You look at the most valuable companies in the world today, they are all data-driven companies. You can talk about what they do and digital X, Y, or Z, but at their core, these companies are all about data. They look at how do I turn data into insights that allow me to better serve my customers? How do I use data to optimize what I do from a product, from a delivery, from an execution point of view? How do I actually let data tell me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong? And that's part of that cultural change that companies need to focus on. Now, there's three real types of data that I think about. There's data that each of you have in your companies that you can use today. Some of you are, some of you aren't, but it's there. There's also data that you can acquire. This is data that is available to you. You might not be capturing it in any real way yet, but it's there. It's implicit in what you do. It's a byproduct of the work that you produce. And then finally, there's data that you can buy. So I'm going to walk through a few examples later on about different examples of each of the use cases behind these types of data. But I first want to hit on one other point that I think is incredibly important for actually driving transformation and change and becoming that front runner that has 122% growth. And that's focus on solving real business problems. It's really easy to get caught up in a big enterprise program or trying to boil the ocean. But at the end of the day, the companies that I'm seeing have the most success are those that are focused on what are actual problems that I can solve, or what are actual things that I can do that create a better experience for my customers, or for my employees, or for my entire ecosystem that I work with. And keeping it very structured around something that you can manage and measure. The narrower the use case, the better the results I'm seeing. So that's very important to keep in mind as you think about what to do. And the great news is, there's an entire ecosystem of very specific applied solutions. So venture capital used to fund these big platforms focused on natural language understanding or deep learning as a broad technology base. That's shifted. We're actually seeing more investment now in very targeted applications focused on solving real business problems than any other thing. It represents about 40% of the total VC capital combined for the past quarter of 2019. So we've turned a corner. We've moved from the promise of AI to the realization of some of those promises in the form of actual applications that are solving business problems and creating bottom line benefit. So let's look at what are some of those. First, if we look at some of those solutions from data that we have, there's a few, but I'm going to focus on a couple right now in financial services just to give you guys a little bit of color about what's possible with the things that might not be as sexy, you might not see in Hollywood movies, but make a lot of business to a company's bottom line. First is around back office automation. Some of you know, some of you don't know, most of you that work in finance probably do know that an inordinate amount of cost in capital markets and finance in general is fixing things that humans break. So we do a lot of things, and a lot of people are involved in everything from trading to lending. Pretty much anything that touches any of the financial processes eventually makes its way to a back office operation. And the main job of that back office is to fix errors that got entered the wrong way or were entered differently by two different people. So much of that can be automated with technology. So Easy Apps, great company, love these guys. They're out there at a couple of the biggest banks on the planet already being used, and they're generating 30% plus savings for major investment banks by using machine learning to take the data that they already have and use it to identify why are these mistakes happening, what's common about them, and how can we automate the recommendations to fix them. So it's real, it's bottom line impact, and it's creating significant uptick for these guys. The next is around fraud. A huge problem for a lot of banks and frankly a lot of retailers as well. And this is all data you have. You know where transactions are coming from, you know the mobile devices, you know the websites. And this is things that traditionally have been done and leveraged from if-then clauses with a lot of people looking at it and trying to resolve it. Beautiful thing about machine learning is we can take 10, 20, 50 different data points that we have and use these to actually identify proactively what really is fraud and what isn't. And it's amazing the difference that you see between machine learning driven solutions like these and manual efforts. Literally, orders of magnitude gap both between the fraud detection as well as the elimination of false positives, which is one of the biggest problems in fraud detection. So that just gives you an idea of some of the things you can do with data that you already have. You don't need to go out, find any new data, buy any new data, you have it. It's just implementing machine learning solutions around that. Now, let me talk about data that you can acquire. This is data that you actually do have, even though you don't know it yet. It's all around you, it's what people are saying, what people are doing, what your customers are engaging with. And for the purposes of this, I want to talk about this section with the frame of reference around individual data, what people are actually doing. So I want to talk about two things that, for anyone that runs a retail business here or interacts with consumers directly, what people can see and what people can hear from what all of our customers are doing and what they're saying. So if you look at what they're doing, it's actually pretty phenomenal. Machine vision's been around a while, and it's really cool and it's fun. You can walk in front of a machine that tells you how old it thinks you are or what piece of art you look like. But when you get to real use cases behind it, it starts to get much more complicated in some ways, but easier in others. You have a lot of privacy constraints, so I like the fact that these guys, Hypercognition, actually focus on keeping all the data on an edge device, so it never goes to a cloud, it never goes anywhere else. So from a privacy point of view, it's much tighter and secure. But with that, you can start to drive real results across a number of different industries. In retail, you can optimize how people go through a store, what areas are actually high traffic, what areas are not, where there's dwell time, and how does that translate into what products are being sold, and putting your higher margin, higher yield products in those areas. From a services point of view, making sure that when people show up at a casino or at another services organization, you're taking care of your best customers first. You know who they are when they arrive. You can see that and have the alerts sent out. Healthcare, tremendous, tremendous potential as we look at the ability to enable elders to stay in their homes longer by using machine vision to track how they are comfortable at home, when they have issues, and send alerts to nurses and practitioners to take care of that when they do have actual issues that need to be resolved. And last but not least, the ability to use machine vision for security on an edge device. This is an incredibly important thing to know who's in a location, what are they doing, where are they going. And all of this is possible, and it's really easy to implement. This is not the type of thing that takes months or quarters or years. This is, use it with your existing software, get and go. So it's all there, and that's what you see. Now let's talk about what people actually say, because this is one of the most amazing sources of insight that is out there right now. Company that I like on this is a company called eContext, and they built this amazingly large knowledge graph that takes the words that we say and translates them into what are the concepts we're talking about. Now, all right, sounds all well and good. What does that actually mean to me? How can I use that? First thing is, you can actually understand what people are talking about. So if I'm looking at a company, what do they care about? What are they tweeting about? And just to make it real for people here, I've taken AI Business, which many of you in this room follow as they're the sponsors for this conference, and said, what do they actually talk about when they tweet? So on their social media presence, what are the things that they care about? Obviously, AI is the biggest one right there in the middle, but there's some insightful things. Talk a lot about health. NVIDIA seems to be the most talked about partner that they have up there in the ecosystem. So you can get a really quick insight. So when you think about your ability to plug this into a CRM system and understand insights about a person that you might be calling or people that you're interacting with before, it's incredibly useful, and it's the type of thing that literally takes seconds. A person could theoretically have done it if they scrolled through everything somebody said, but with technology and some of the AI tools today, you can do it instantly. Now this gets even more interesting if you take it one step further and say, okay, great, I understand that's what AI Business talks about, but what do all of you talk about? What does everybody in this room that follows them talk about? So we can take every single person that follows them and break out what we talk about and what are the topics that make us wake up and get excited and that we feel compelled to share with others. And you can see that, there's the things that would be obvious that are significantly more than others around computers and electronics and science and humanities. But we talk a lot about health, books and literature. Beauty, shockingly, actually comes up fairly over-indexed. So you can draw some really interesting nuggets out of this, and you can drill down into it to different levels and see at each step, what are the things that people are doing and talking about, and what does that mean to me? And go down even to the lowest level and see, within technology. So this group talks about Microsoft more than any other company when we tweet. We talk about Brexit a lot, and that's a logarithmic scale. So that's 14 times more than a normal person, we talk about Brexit. So near and dear to a lot of people in this room, apparently. But it gives you a real insight into what actually makes us tick. Who are we as people? And that allows you to figure out, what do I do with that information? How do I take that forward and turn that into real tangible actions that I can use to run the company better? Now, the last area I want to talk about is data that you can buy. So as you look at data that's available to augment your solutions, and effectively, if you think about the first two as the petrol that you put in your car to make it go, this is the nitrous to supercharge it. What can you add on that really accelerates your outcome and creates better results? So sticking with the theme of individuals and how people behave, I want to talk about a company, and there's other companies like this, but I like this one right now that has Complementix. They have data coming into them every day from over 1 billion mobile devices. On one hand, that is absolutely terrifying that information is out there about us, and full disclosure, this is 100% GDPR compliant, so this is still all operating within the remit of what the law allows, but it is providing incredible insight. So as terrifying as it is that information's out there, from a business point of view, it's incredibly exciting what you can do with that. The ability to understand where people are through the day, how they move, what they are doing, where they're going, has tremendous implications. So let me walk through just 2 hypothetical examples about how people might use this data. So one is, if you're an airline, hypothetically somebody that might be speaking after me, there is a great example when you think about how do you optimize your advertising dollars and your loyalty programs. And I can look at, from that data set, and understand which people only fly my airline, by what terminals they go to. I can look at what people only fly other airlines. And while I care about both of those audiences, I really care about the people that fly my airline and other people's airlines and aren't quite loyal to anybody yet. Because that's a group of people that spends a lot of money and isn't tied into any particular person yet. So that's my target audience that I really want to reach, really want to encourage to give them a reason to fly my airline more than anybody else's. So I can take that insight and then use that group to target it very effectively for advertising, for loyalty rewards, even to figure out what are the common routes they take to the airport so I can figure out where to put billboards up. Huge opportunity on that side. Now, another example on the financial services side. Let's look at how a capital markets firm might look at that data and use it from a trading point of view. I want to understand how Tesco's performing, because I believe that what people are doing will tell me with a fairly high degree of accuracy whether I should be buying the stock, shorting the stock. I can use that data to figure out day over day, week over week, month over month, is the foot traffic going up or going down within the stores? What's actually happening and what's changing? And that gives me an edge. That gives me a leading indicator about how Tesco is performing as a business, probably in some cases even before they know it, because we get to see what those trends look like, what's happening, and if you want to get really complicated about it, you can even map that back to where the people live, figure out disposable income, average demographics, and have a very clear picture of what the economics of that company look like. And this is a retail example. You could use that same data for production plants. You know, the possibilities are endless, but this really goes into being able to take data that's available and use it for new use cases that create bottom line results. So, very quickly before I wrap up, I want to give you guys a little bit of a look into the future. So as we think about all of that I've talked about with different uses of data and how data really is fueling all of the AI solutions that are creating bottom line impact, there's the obvious question, which is, where do I keep my data? It's not under your mattress, but unfortunately for many of us, it actually is today. That's the equivalent of what a lot of our companies and organizations do is, we keep our data under the mattress at home, and it's sloppy, it's dirty, it gets lost. Now, if I ask anyone in this audience, where do you keep your money? I'm pretty sure everyone can tell me, keep it in a bank, and you can probably tell me which bank. So as we look at the first step of what's going to happen with data, and we're already seeing this as a result of GDPR, California data regulations, and other legislation, we're starting to see data trusts come to the forefront. And what data trusts really are is the data equivalent of a bank for money. It's a secure and safe infrastructure that you can put your data assets in with a set of policies to govern how they are accessed, an external trustee to manage that and be accountable for that, that allows access to data consumers of that, whether those consumers are in your company or outside of your company. This is where the world is headed, and this is going to become something very common that all of us interact with on a much more frequent basis in the years to come. Now, the natural knock-on impact of this is that if all of our data is in the equivalent of a bank, and it's secure, and it's trackable, and it's very crisp and clean, we're going to start to see data exchanges. So data is going to move from something that is this amorphous thing that we all have as an organization to a very clean, structured entity that is tradable. And the impact of this is it will become a balance sheet asset. So instead of the implicit companies that I highlighted at the beginning of this presentation that are data-driven and incredibly large and powerful, everybody that has a real data asset that has the ability to put that into a trust and start to monetize that over the coming years will be able to look at that as a balance sheet asset. Now, I don't think that's going to happen next year or probably even a few years after that, but as we look at the next 5, 10 years, we're going to see a very stark shift as data becomes more and more critically looked at and structured and becomes something that is actually a balance sheet asset that is used in how you value a company, how you make decisions on capital allocation, and frankly, how you run your businesses. So, to stitch all of this together at the end, key things that I wanted to have everybody walk away from this presentation with is first movers are going to fundamentally outperform everybody else by a significant order of magnitude. So getting started is incredibly important, and getting started small is the way to go. You don't need to boil the ocean. Have a culture that embraces change and view data as a strategic asset of your company. Data that you have, data that you can acquire, and data that you can buy. And solve specific problems. Don't try to build some massive infrastructure. Focus on things that can provide real results and tangible returns, and that will create great outcomes for all of you. So if you have other questions, want to understand more about any of the things I've talked about or what we do, we've got a big booth straight out up front. I'll be there all day and most of tomorrow, as well as our entire team. So hopefully we will see some of you there. And are we good? All right. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, everybody.